We've got four very good speakers, very knowledgeable speakers today in alphabetical order of surname Lawrence Cobb, Zaza El Sheikh, Roger Levitt, and Eve Pienaar. Zaza is, I don't think, on just at the moment. She's traveling to a medical appointment, but I'm sure she'll join us as soon as she can. Um, Hopefully you may have had a chance to have looked up our speakers. Um, This meeting is being recorded.
Oh,
Hello, could whoever's got their uh, au- audio on, please shut it down.
yeah.
Thank you. Um, And so I will invite, in the order I've just mentioned, the speakers. They may introduce themselves briefly. They're going to speak for 10 minutes and then we'll have Q&As at the very end. Although Zaza, because she's got to get away, she'll take 5 minutes of Q&A um, on her topic when she's finished her 10 minutes. So starting, please, with Lawrence. Lawrence Cobb, please.
Good morning, everyone. Um, I won't bore you with the history of my life, as David quite rightly said. I think for the purposes of the relevance for why I'm speaking today, I believe, although I may be doing somebody a disservice, that I'm the only mediator who is both a SEND accredited mediator and on CEDA faculty. And I have, for my sins, done over 1,000 mediations, although numerically the majority of those are in the education send sector. I'm not an educational psychologist or have any qualification. I did foolishly, when I started out, do a stage 2 foundation course in understanding autism, which I was advised would take me about 20 hours, and about 120 hours later, I covered that. So I have some background knowledge. But what I'm really going to speak to you about today regarding dealing with mental health issues and neurodiversity is some practical issues about what occurs in mediations and how these develop, and also some distinctions between mediating online and in person in such scenarios. I think the first thing to really bear in mind when you encounter, either with advance warning or by surprise on the day of the mediation, is to be flexible and listen. um, there may be a temptation to immediately mentally categorize somebody regarding their capability of comprehension. That, in my view, would be a mistake. I will come on to some practical examples later on in my allotted time slot, which is now 2 minutes in, just to give you some examples of where things work and mea culpa, where things don't necessarily work quite as well as you hope they might. So I'm just going to, I think pre-mediation, in the education sector mediations, you usually get a fairly clear indication as to whether the any of the participants have neurodiverse issues that may affect their ability to comprehend and communicate. So you will know, for example, whether there is an educational health care plan which includes issues regarding autism. What you won't know is whether there are any neurodiversity issues with any of the other participants, often the parents. So one of the things you will need to determine is an understanding of, in effect, their advocate, if the parent is their advocate, and what their comprehension capabilities are. So you really need to take that into account. And by part of the pre-mediation call, get an understanding, um, um, using very straightforward language and using listening skills. Language is always an issue in mediation, and keeping it simple. Something which I tend to find perhaps more challenging than most due to a propensity to have consumed a rather large dictionary as a child. So using three words when one will do. So I think you have to be very focused on keeping it simple and listening carefully. Um, in a way, in-person mediations, which actually now happen quite rarely in the education sector, um, give you more opportunity to manage individuals. And the issues often arise in relation to parents or grandparents who, regarding what educational support they feel that the young person needs, may have a very different perspective on that, may also to a certain extent, superimpose their own prejudices regarding their young person's capability, and also, in some cases, have the same issues. Normally, they will tell you if they have issues of understanding, which you can then adapt to by either speaking slowly. I remember one of the first mediations I did, um, the opening line from the parent was, she's rather similar to our other seven. She's most similar to the cousin who's currently serving time. And by the way, I'm a schizophrenic. And that was his opening sentence in the mediation. And much easier to deal with. That was a mediation where at one point I actually took the said parent for a walk around the block to calm down, which was slightly unnerving as I am 5'5" on a good day and he was about 6'5". But just generally giving him the opportunity to calm down. So breaks are particularly important. Don't overuse them, but make it clear that the person is in a confidential, safe space, and that you are not neither judge nor executioner as a mediator. You are there to facilitate a discussion. So light touch, simple language, reframing is very useful because that's one way of getting to understand whether what they have said to you is what they meant to say to you because of any challenge they may face in using communication. So in person, make them feel safe. Confidentiality, obviously key. Lighting can be absolutely key for any environment, particularly there tends to be a great deal of sensitivity to bright lighting. I'll give you a practical example of that a little bit later, but not too much later, David, don't worry. Seating, um, dynamics. Again, I'll give you some examples of that. Now, you might think that on a virtual mediation provides more challenges for people who are neurodiverse, but actually there are tools within that that make it more helpful, particularly with young people. A lot of young people with neurodiversity challenges do not want to appear physically at the mediation. But what they can be persuaded to do and be comfortable in doing is be present but off screen, and that will enable them to participate. You can use the chat, invite them to use the chat. You can get them the mute button to facilitate them communicating with their advocate. What they want to achieve is also particularly useful. And what tends to happen sometimes when you have that sort of setup and they become more relaxed in the environment, is they'll actually drift onto screen. So you'll actually see them appear and they'll get more engaged with the process. The worst thing you can do when that happens is say, "Hi, it's lovely to see you," because then you will in effect break the wall and they will suddenly realize that they've relaxed and they'll stop relaxing. So just deal with it naturally. Let them come on screen. Let them use chat. Let them have the screen off if that's necessary. Sometimes let them submit notes. What you're trying to do as a mediator is to get them engaged and comfortable. I'm going to use some practical examples of how that works, and then I'll come on to how it quickly relates into commercial mediations. So 1 hour 30, 1 minute 30 seconds left. I believe I'm the only mediator who's ever mediated completely in the dark because we had a teenager who turned up to the local authority office. The local authority officer couldn't dim the lights, and she was about to walk. And I said, "Well, we've got enough ambient light. Let's mediate in the dark." She stayed for the entire meeting, and at the end of the mediation, the father came up to me and said that was the first time in her entire life she'd stayed in a meeting for more than 10 minutes. So be flexible. Against me, I did another mediation where a parent described the capabilities of their Down syndrome young person. I set the meeting room up. In we came into the meeting. I said to the young person, because she'd been described as not particularly able by the parent, where would you like to sit? She promptly decided she wanted to sit in my chair. I moved around, we shuffled around. What became apparent was that the parent had superimposed her prejudices of the capabilities of the young person on the young person, where the young person was far more capable. So you have to be adaptable and realize those things can go wrong. This all helps in commercial mediation. Similar issues apply. I found that because people can see from my CV that I'm very familiar with dealing with people with neurodiverse challenges, that they'll confide in me. And you might be surprised as to how often people in positions of high responsibility in commercial mediations have neurodiversity issues, which it really assists for them to confide in you as a mediator, and that will enable you to adapt your approach and have a more successful mediation. Anyway, I'm out of time, so we can pick up more of that anon when we go to Q&A. David.
That's great, Lawrence. Thanks very much. I'm not sure if Zaza has been able to join us yet. If you have, Zaza, could you come on screen? Otherwise, we'll leapfrog
Yes,
to
I'm here.
you're with us. Okay.
I'm here. I'm here.
Right. Are you?
So good morning, everyone. I just wanted to carry on from where Lawrence started us. I'm not sure if you can see my slides. Can you see them?
Yes, yes, we
Yes,
can.
you can. Great. Okay. So I just wanted to really speak about in the event that you're faced with a mediation where not only are the parties, one or more of the parties neurodiverse, but also that they may be from a diaspora community. Diaspora community meaning that people who are either second or third generation immigrants. So why that is important is that the reference points that they have will be slightly different. So I just,
Zaza, sorry to interrupt. We can only see part of the slide.
okay.
Is there any way of
See if I can
changing it?
make it any smaller. Is it that it's too big?
No, can't see it.
We're losing the left-hand margin because I think you've got the
I'm not sure how to do that. So I'll
okay.
take it off. Shall I just
Just
take it off or?
just just don't worry.
Okay, fine. So what
Sorry,
I
forgive
wanted
me
to,
interrupting you. On the bottom of your screen, just next to the plus and minus, there is a little icon which will make it full screen. So just down to the right, a little bit to the left,
yes,
to the left, a little bit to the left, that one.
that
No,
one.
to the right, that one, or the next one across, to the right of your cursor.
Right.
There you go.
Is that okay now?
Well, it should make it full screen, but
Has it
Yeah.
worked or not? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me get in because I know that time is tight. So I wanted to first of all talk about how in highly emotive conflicts such as the ones that I mediate, for some reason, who knows why, that's what that comes to me. So family and probate cases where emotions are very high, and in a book written about some of my work in 2021 by Katrina Abatis, the foreword is written by Daniel Shapiro. Some of you may recognize that name, where he says that emotions are definitely, in his view, messengers that let us know when our identity appears to be affirmed, threatened, or denied. And for people with ND, that can be particularly difficult to navigate emotion as well as the need in these particular cases to express respect as well, to be able to reflect that and express it. And many of you will be familiar with the idea that people with ND can present in very different ways. Some can be verbose, some can be quite silent, some can meander around the point, and there's rolling of eyes. There's also those who are hyper-focused on particular issues. And for all of this, what I have found in my mediation practice is that people are already quite impatient, as in the other party. So the mediator, it's not just navigating the content of it, which can be complex in family, divorce and probate. It's also everybody's mood with the party who is bringing a claim, for instance, or it could be the other way around, a party defending a claim, to be able to communicate, because there may be decades of resentment built up over misapprehensions, which could be expressive or receptive. So just to elaborate a little on that, I have been dealing with a case where it was a family case where somebody feels very rejected by his wife, and she feels very repulsed by him, not in his person, so to speak, but by his communication. So over the years, resentment has built up regarding various things that he said or not said, because he couldn't read the room. And just before we started, Dave made a disclosure, which was quite interesting. So it is very important, as we all know, to be able to read the room. And so what I wanted to offer really was some practical tips now, just to add that it's incredibly important in such cases with diaspora communities involved, to really help the person who's got ND to be able to express more clearly what they would like to say. So I start off in the private preliminary meeting, so before the parties meet, with written outline of what the day will look like, so that the person with ND can refer to that during the day. Of course, making very clear that we may need to loop back depending on what happens. I also make it very clear to them that we can shuttle for as much of the process as they would like. Ordinarily, of course, there's a mixture of both shuttling and joint, but for people with ND, they may find it much easier to just shuttle. So I make clear that that's the case. And I also ask for permission to disclose if it's not known by the other parties that they have ND, so as to set the expectations. So as mentioning before, in terms of the content of the mediation, the greatest challenge will be the expectations of the parties who are not neurodiverse, that they will be expecting respect. They will be also feeling ashamed that they're in a dispute, because in diaspora communities, conflict is shameful, because good people don't have conflict, and certainly don't have conflict like divorce or inheritance issues. They just don't do that. That's not good manners or good upbringing. So there'll be that in the room. So my advice to you is to, if you feel comfortable, to have more shuttling and to really explore those elements. Thank you very much indeed. If anyone has any questions, I think David said that it was okay to go to questions after mine.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you, Zaza. Yes, we've got about 5 minutes for questions just on Zaza's presentation, please. So if, Zaza, you can close the
Yes.
your presentation, and if anybody's got any questions or comments about what Zaza's just said, could you please put your virtual hand up if you can do so, or just, if you can't, just unmute yourself and put your question or comment. Thank you. Somebody's just asking about
Yes.
sharing. Can you send me those through, Zaza?
Yes,
Do you want?
I will. I will.
Okay, and then I'll forward them to everybody.
Dave Vernon is asking a question.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Sophie, I've got you first.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave. Thank you, Zaza. That was really interesting. Could you just elaborate a tiny bit more about how you might go about exploring the shame issue? I mean, just it's quite a difficult question to ask, isn't it?
Yes. Are you ashamed? No, that's not the way to do it. Are you sure you're not ashamed? No, so it's really those explorative questions that how are you feeling? How has this made you feel? Those questions that you already know and use. And don't be put off by I'm fine about it, sort of a blanket, I'm fine about it. Still try in that appreciative inquiry style of going background, looping ground to, you tell me a little bit about when this started, how did it make you feel? All right. Good.
Thanks, Sophie. Vernon, I've got you next, please.
Morning, Dave. Morning, Zaza. I was just thinking you mentioned about shame and the fact that the person might be feeling that shame, but also seeking permission to disclose the neurodiversity
Correct.
to another party. How difficult is that for someone with neurodiversity, and will they feel shameful? And how much counselling is involved of that person before disclosing it?
Yes, it is incredibly difficult. In some cases, so a case that I've been working on recently, it's a family case, and the father, I believe, is neurodiverse as well. So, father of the man who's getting divorced, there's property implications because the father owns part of the former matrimonial home. And so it's very difficult to work with somebody who's diagnosed as ND and somebody who's not diagnosed as ND. And the person who's not diagnosed saying that it's absolutely shameful. I mean, the relationship is completely dislocated because of all the things that his son has said or not said at various times. And so, in terms of the disclosure, this man was very happy to disclose, but the father, who, as I mentioned, I believe is undiagnosed ND, rejects it completely. So he denies it. He just says, he's just useless. He's too complicated, too arrogant. And this person, the son, who's getting divorced, is actually a lawyer, very, highly intelligent. But as we know, ND isn't about intellectual ability. It's the difficulty is the communication and reading the room. I think we've got one more, maybe.
Yeah, Bill, this is the last one I think we've got time for. Bill, would you like to?
Thank you, Dave. Thank you so much, Zaza, for actually bringing up this issue, especially within the diaspora community. However, my question is towards the fact that the issue of shame does not does not start because of somebody having ND or something. It goes back within families, and especially more with ladies. Mm-hmm. Now, considering that that shame is kind of ingrained within families, within the diaspora community, because you are here, you are expected to behave in a certain way, in a certain manner. How do you deal with that within a mediation setting, which even if it's going to take 3-4 days, how do you manage, digging that from back where it started to where we are now, as we speak together here?
So again, it's all the things that you already do, Bill, and others. That exploration is so key. And as I say, not to be put off by the initial everything is fine, or what does it matter, or it doesn't matter, all those initial denials. And of course, we as mediators are not going to be annoying about it and say, look, I'm sure there's more to this than what you're saying. You know, we never say that. But we know that whole iceberg, all of you will be familiar with the iceberg drawing, and that people may present, diaspora communities in particular. And the reason that I chose to talk about this is because there's so much hidden under the surface. And I would not want mediators here on the call or any other mediators to just miss it, because you miss opportunities for healing, generational healing within that mediation opportunity. So I'm conscious of the time, but thank you so much for all your questions. I don't want to impact my colleagues' time that they have with you.
Thanks very much for that, Zaza. If you can stay on for as long as you can, that'd be great. So I can now please ask Roger Levitt, to speak for his 10 minutes. If you're with us, Roger.
Thank you, everybody, for a wonderful turnout. It's really impressive to see so many people on the screen. And I'm going to talk to you firstly about the view from the CMC and the way that the CMC supports this area, particularly because the CMC is a charity with a key objective to encourage the use of mediation. In doing so, we support individuals in conflict and the mediators who seek to support them. I might have missed it, but I don't think I've heard anything yet about the mediators, because we as mediators also have the challenge of perhaps even our own neurodiversity. I know that I've spoken to a couple of mediators who have declared that they are neurodiverse, and of course that presents a different level of challenge when dealing with parties in a mediation. So from the CMC's point of view, we recognise that the interplay between conflict and mental health needs much wider acknowledgement and support. I think we are heading in the right direction, which is good. We acknowledge that it takes courage to attend a mediation, and in some cases that applies to the mediator as well, particularly in very, very challenging situations. And placing yourself at the heart of a dispute between other people shouldn't be underestimated as a challenge to our own mental health. So what the CMC has done is they have produced a number of videos which are all available on the CMC website, and I would strongly encourage you to have a look at them. They were produced by Marie Coombs and Victoria Harris, who is the CEO of the Civil Mediation Council. And what they have done in putting these together is to try and encourage people to think more around this topic. I think that, you know, we've heard from the speakers already how important a topic it is, but I think going into mediation, and perhaps going into mediation for the first time as a newly qualified mediator, encourages you to think around the topic and become more aware. And I found personally, when I watched the videos, when I became involved in mediations where there were elements of neurodiversity which were not necessarily disclosed, but the more aware one is, the more one can appreciate the issues that are playing out in the mediation. So in fact, what I did was I amended my briefing note to invite people to confidentially disclose to me and discuss if there is an issue. in this area. I appreciate that others have said that sometimes people disclose of their own accord, but I have found that inviting people to do that is powerful and useful, because sometimes people don't wish to disclose and unless they're asked. And the other issue that I found is that very often people I found uh, exhibit elements of neurodiversity, but because either they're not diagnosed or they're not even aware, that's something which we all have to pick up and deal with some way in the mediation. So I think the key issue for me here is the awareness and making us aware as mediators right from the start that this is something that we should be aware of. Now, for that reason, we've now made these videos a part of the application process for CMC membership, and people will need to say that they have watched the videos, but it's an enlightening process rather than a suffering through them. I think it's really valuable, irrespective of whether it's a requirement. So I think that's the first thing I'd like to say about the videos and the CMC. Then we have a mental health first aid course that could be attended to increase knowledge in this area. And you will have been aware, if you saw the video that came round, or the email that came round from Dave just before. There is a course on neurodiversity which I attended, and of course there are other courses, but nevertheless I can speak from personal knowledge of this course that it helped considerably for me in increasing my understanding and awareness. So I'd encourage you to have a look at that. And then I suppose last thing, before I run out of time, is I'd like to speak about my own personal experience in mediating with parties who are neurodiverse. As I mentioned earlier, there are I can identify plenty of participants in mediations who exhibit the attributes of being neurodiverse, and they don't know it. And so it's very important to make allowance for people in different every different side of perception, understanding. We're all different, of course, but there are some people who find that it's very difficult to read more than 3 lines in a document, or more than a page, or can't concentrate beyond a minute or 2 minutes. And I have found that more people than not will not disclose why. And so that's of course possibly part of the condition, and we also have to be aware that we're not psychologists or psychiatrists, and we just have to deal with, as best we can, the participants before us, and to make the process work as smoothly as it can. And we will be faced with all sorts of left field situations, which we, as we get more experienced, we would be able to deal with, when at the start we couldn't. I won't go into great detail because we don't have time, but right near the beginning of my career, I was faced with someone who declared that he was suicidal. This was in a commercial dispute. And I suppose I don't mind admitting that threw me. That wasn't something I dealt with before in a mediation. But it's just I'm giving it to you as an example of something that can happen which we can't anticipate. And so I think in closing, I would just say awareness and awareness and patience and understanding and use your skills, your guts, your knowledge, your intuition, and accept that we're all different. And I think I'm going to wait for questions till afterwards.
Yes, please. Yes, please, Roger. Yeah. Thanks very much, Roger. So now, if I can invite Eve PNR.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Certainly not leastly.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me properly?
I think so, yes.
Great. Okay, well, very, very brief amount of time to tackle a really important topic, and thank you very much to my colleagues. I echo all of the words that have been said already. I'm a full-time commercial mediator and I work with CEDA. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about tips for dealing with commercial mediations when you're presented with neurodiverse parties or indeed their representatives, which is not unusual. And just to say, I did give a webinar on a CEDA masterclass on this with someone who is expert in this field, Laura Kirby, and you can there is a link to that webinar on my LinkedIn profile if you're interested in hearing from a professional in this field. So just picking up on a few things to think about in commercial mediations, but I think they will apply across any mediation. So firstly, just to be mindful that the term neurodivergent is an umbrella term, of course. So there's a broad spectrum of conditions with significant overlap. And the environment, the stress levels will all impact how individuals who present as ND will be reacting during the day. So being mindful of checking in from time to time during the day is really important, but also being mindful that the whole autism spectrum is non-linear. So if you look at the representation of the different neurodiverse conditions, a party might be bouncing between different conditions during the day. So as mediator, adapting to that and responding accordingly can be really important. So it's not, they don't present in the morning the way they will be at lunchtime or in the afternoon. Obviously, as my colleagues have mentioned, people with autism struggle sometimes to read between the lines or to manage sensory distractions. So that's something to be mindful of as well as a mediator setting up the mediation process. So being a CEDA faculty member, Lawrence, you'll know where I'm coming from. I'm just going to touch on relationship, process and content issues to be mindful of as mediator. In terms of relationship, I don't know if some of you have come across the term double empathy, but what that's trying to define is the fact that if you are neuronormative, faced with someone who is neurodiverse, might be thinking, I need to make all the adaptations for that person to understand me better. But in fact, they are doing exactly the same. So we present as different to the party as the party is to us. So both sides have to be mindful of that all the time. Obviously, the mediator needs to demonstrate empathy and trust to establish rapport. And I think that's always the case, but it's more so the case in situations where you're faced with a neurodiverse party. And of course, being mindful of how that presents to the other side. So if you're going to have to spend more time with a neurodiverse person, explaining to the other side that in order for the mediation to be set up optimally, you may be spending more time in their room during the day and not to read anything in that. Obviously, how you respond as a mediator will also depend somewhat as to how much permission the party has given you to both to disclose to you personally, but they may or may not be willing for the other parties to know that they are neurodiverse. Some parties, I find, will tell you up front, and in fact it's in the papers, and they make a lot of it. Others may not realize that they can share it. They might be ashamed, they might be worried about it, they might be masking. So working with that party to try to help them share as much as is safe for them to do so in order for them to fully participate in the mediation is very helpful. And if you have a party who doesn't volunteer it, but you suspect that they may have neurodiverse conditions, being curious is really helpful. So I might be asking a party during the mediation, I might check in, what is working well for you in this mediation? Or do you have any suggestions about things that we could do differently that might work better for you? Or how do you perceive that the other party sees your case? Do you feel that you've managed to put it across in a way that you feel comfortable, you've been heard? One of the concepts that my colleague on the webinar that I was referring to, Laura Kirby, talks about is the leaky bucket syndrome. So people who are not neurodiverse tend to have, if you think of a bucket that fills up with stress during the day, we have holes in that bucket. And I shouldn't say we as if I'm not neurodiverse. What I'm mentioning is, as a mediator, the things that we should be mindful of. But people who are neurodiverse do not have holes at the bottom of their bucket. So as the stresses accumulate during the day, they may get overwhelmed. And being mindful of that can be very helpful because it encourages the party to ask you for breaks when they need to just decompress and release some of things like that. Just a practical example, I'm just going to try and bring a couple of practical examples of my work where I've worked with neurodiverse parties who have who've told me that they are right at the outset and have been willing to share that with the other side. So I had one case, it was a property damage case where this individual who had a very broad range of diagnosed ND conditions, from autism, dyslexia, OCD, and that was very relevant because the damage to her property due to a leak from the roof had caused mold, and the mold was so abhorrent to her that she couldn't enter her property. It had affected her psychologically tremendously. And the managing agents were there, and the landlord was there, and we worked ahead of the mediation to make it as safe a space as we could for her. So she arrived an hour earlier so that I could ensure that she was calm. She had a party with her in support. She arrived in full-on panic attack mode. I've actually never seen anything like it. It was really quite alarming. Luckily, we were at an office with first aid experts, so we were able to calm her down. She was extremely cold, so we got her tea. She was unable to speak and process information. So we just got her in a calm room with her support party, water, tea, and gave her the time she needed to just calm down, because the day was very important to her. She really wanted to get across to all the other individuals for the two defendants, how much the impact on her life had been. Also, before the mediation, we'd agreed with the parties, I had worked with all three of the parties to agree an agenda for the day. And we chunked out the day so that we dealt with the issues in chunks of the day, with breaks in between. So we didn't have one joint session to deal with all of the issues. We had 3 sets of joint session and then shuttle mediation. The mediation settled with one party, not the other. I kept it going for a few weeks after. It did settle entirely in the end. But what really surprised me, and I thought I was very prepared for, thought through all of the loopholes, was how well she presented at that joint session. It was extraordinary. She had prepared a whole set of papers for herself with documentation, and she described so well. It was just so emotional, but so compelling, the impact that this had had on her, and why the delays in dealing with it and the passing, the buck and all the rest of it, how that had impacted her. And the other party, especially the managing agent, put their papers to one side when it was their turn to speak and said, we hear you, we apologize. We're here to try to resolve this. but we just want to say we are so sorry for what you've experienced, and we can visibly see the distress. And that was the breakthrough moment. She felt that she had made the best of the mediation, and we were able to move into commercial negotiations. So those different tools worked very well on the day, but the taking the breaks is also very important to remember. So in terms of process, and I'm mindful of time, adjusting the environment, I think, Lawrence, you mentioned light. Some people get triggered by light or by yellow or by, a room that is all cluttered. So discussing that with the party ahead of time. How can I set the room up so that it will work well for you? As I mentioned, allowing timeouts, allowing more time for the confidential pre-mediation calls. You're going to need this person or whoever to really have time to feel heard by the mediator. And so I allocate quite a lot of time ahead of time so it doesn't eat up too much in the mediation day. Considering the bundle situation, I think this was mentioned earlier, but there are parties who find it very difficult to read through long documents. So they may have tools that can help them, that they can deploy. It's highlighters or it's software which helps them read documents better. But there are other ways also of adapting the mediation process for them. So I have worked sometimes with 2 bundles. There's a very, very thin bundle for the party who can't process much information. And then there's the bundle for the lawyers to refer to. That way, the party doesn't feel that they've lost out. They have access to the second bundle, but they're leaving it to the representative to work through that for them. Being really clear is very important. Being clear about timescales, clear about expectations, helping the parties understand how to get to the venue, just all of those little things to reduce the stress can be super helpful. On one case I had, the claimant was autistic, and that was all through the bundle. She made a lot of it. She said, I'm autistic, therefore I want to present my 36 PowerPoints about all of the damage that has happened due to the builders, doing an extension which was shambolic. I tried to explain to her on the day that we wouldn't have time for that. She got very angry. We did it. The case settled on the day, but I could tell she was not happy. She actually got a good deal, frankly, but she wasn't happy with the outcome. And when I was reflecting afterwards, it felt to me that I had not, I'd missed a trick. I should have understood when I spoke to her before the mediation that I should have said, why don't you send me the PowerPoints? I will look at them before the mediation. That way I will understand. And if there is anything in those that I think at a particular point would be useful, I will invite you to share it. So I really missed a trick with that, I think. And then very quickly on content, what did I want? So I think, one thing that I think is important is trying to imagine the experience of the neurodivergent party during the day. How are they perceiving the information that they're receiving? How are they conveying to the other side? As I said, that double empathy issue. If there's too much data, or if they will check out. I've seen parties literally dissociate, and they're just not present. If that happens, I might call a timeout. I might go our separate ways, and I might go with them for a little walk around the block, get them to get that bucket to empty again, and then come back to be able to fully engage in the mediation process. But helping the other representatives and the other parties at the mediation understand that there is not going to be the opportunity for lengthy opening statements. So managing it with little tools like that. Roger, I think my time is up. Is that right, Dave?
Yes, but if you've got another point you want to make, by all means.
I think skipping to the end, I was just going to say three takeaways. For me, it's empathy and curiosity as mediator is helpful because you continually can make adjustments to the process to help parties. Also, remembering that ND parties navigate between different states during the day is really important. So checking in and seeing what it is they might be in a different area of the spectrum at a different point in the day, and then knowing when to call it a day when a party is no longer really able to process information and really able to give it, get the best out of the mediation, not hesitating to suggest that we call it a day and reconvene at another day, perhaps with less people and for a time-limited mediation, perhaps online. So those are a few tips from my end.
Thanks, Eve. There's been something in the chat from Michael Bartlett. Could you say a little more about double empathy?
Yes, Michael, that's a good question. So double empathy is, the concept is that if a mediator is presented with an ND person, we might be making efforts to try to adapt to what we perceive to be their needs, but just remembering that they're doing exactly the same with the other party. So it's it's a mutual difficulty in communication and understanding, not one way.
Thanks, Eve. We've now got about 15 minutes or so for general Q&A. So if you can please put your virtual hand up, and if your question or comment is directed at anybody specifically, if you can say who that person is. Thank you.
Lawrence is online.
Yeah. Stuart Lawrence,
Hi, David. Thank you very much. This is a question for Roger. Thanks for mentioning the neurodiversity course. I put it in the chat that it's actually next week and there's spaces available. So if anyone's interested, please reach out. But my question is that...
Stuart, if you don't know, I've sent details about that to everybody.
Oh, that's kind. Thank you very much. It's much appreciated. In the neurodiversity training we did with the Brain Charity, one of the things that came up readily is how easily communication styles in mediation can be misinterpreted, particularly in commercial disputes when there's a lot of pressure. And the question to Roger is, from your experience, are there any particular signs that the mediator should look out for that suggest someone is neurodiverse, and how best to engage that person in the process, understanding those particular characteristics?
Thank you, Stuart. I would say from my experience, it can be any number of signals. So it could be somebody who perhaps completely withdraws, somebody who gets angry, somebody who loses patience, somebody who doesn't understand but doesn't want to say that they don't understand, and many more examples as well. I think as mediators, perhaps as I mentioned earlier, the one point that really came home to me from doing the course was just to increase my awareness and understanding of what might be going on that is challenging, that is not whatever we call the norm. And that was the takeaway for me, just to fully increase my awareness and understand. Mention was made earlier about reading the room. Well, we don't have a monopoly on that, because other people in the process sometimes can read the room really well and sometimes people can't at all. So for me, it's the awareness and the patience and the understanding.
Thank you, Roger. Marion Roberts, you've got your hands up, please.
Yes, thank you, speakers. Very, very interesting. I have one question and one comment, really. I've only very recently come across the phenomenon of secondary autism. One party I saw very recently described herself as having secondary autism, and I was totally unfamiliar with this. And I wonder if you could clarify to me what this means. I mean, I obviously looked it up, and it's distinguished from what is called primary or idiopathic autism. But that would be one of my questions. The other is really we've highlighted how important it is to address the needs and the concerns of people with neurodiversity. In my practice of mediation, I've come across recently where a party where their autism, their declared and express identification as being autistic, has been used actually to bully the other party, particularly in failing to acknowledge the emotional impact of what was going on in the room. And that was a concern. And, so I just want to raise these two matters and hope really to have some sort of clarification about both of them.
David, do you want me to come in on some of that?
Yes, by all means, yes, just jump in.
Okay. I'll take your second question first, if I may. This sort of tendency in mediation, possibly to use autism as a sword rather than a shield, I think does happen. I think it is a question of managing that and trying to see how it's affecting the meeting. I think it also comes in on Eve's point regarding double empathy, in that trying to ensure that a party doesn't feel, as I saw a question in the chat, that they're not being in some way bullied or taken advantage of. And that's where the mediator's role is really important, I think, in emphasizing impartiality and asking questions like, asking questions which they may not be able to answer in some cases. So you have to do it with care as to how you think that question would go, or that point would go down in the other room, and just talking that through with them before it's delivered to try and dilute the bullying. It's a bit different in education mediations because the parties generally turn up knowing that that sort of thing is going to happen. The LA officer is sort of partly an expectation. That may happen in commercial mediations, I think is a bit more difficult. But I think I would take a bit more time in exploration if there's a sense of the sort of the sword, and trying to, if you like, focus on the subject matter of the mediation rather than the underlying conditions that may be affecting communication. Now, regarding classifications and whether it's secondary or it's only a personal view, so it's probably completely wrong. But I took the view fairly early on that I wasn't particularly interested in labels. What I was much more interested in is how the individual conducts themselves within the context of the mediation. So it's more a question of adapting to their communication and how they communicate and how they absorb information than worrying too much about labels, because certainly on the very limited knowledge that I have regarding the spectrum of autism, labels are not, I don't think, are particularly helpful in deciding how to deal with somebody in mediation, but others on the panel who are still here may have a contrary view.
Thank you very much.
Can I add one point? I agree entirely, Lawrence, with your point, and I'm no expert on primary or secondary autism, but from a commercial, for those of you who are interested in adaptations of the process from a commercial mediator's point of view, there are different tools that you can deploy. And I've had situations where, in particular, the case I referred to where the lady with her PowerPoints was extremely aggressive and was being, and the individual in the other room, who frankly, fortunately was insured, but whose whole life had been affected so badly by this litigation, I couldn't really bring them together because of that dynamic. But I did do quite a lot of good work with just the lawyers' meetings. So, orchestrating the meetings in slightly different ways to reduce the sword that Lawrence refers to.
Roger, have you got something else to add on this particular point?
Well, Catherine was there before me, so
okay.
Let Catherine go.
Catherine, would you like to pose your question?
Yes, please. I'd written it in the comments, and I think Eve's partially addressed it. But I was particularly concerned or looking to get a view as to how she was able to balance out the adaptation and impartiality, particularly where you've got a commercial mediation matter. I can appreciate there'd be some room or relative comfort in other types of mediation, but for commercial mediation, particularly where you've got two parties who are on roughly the same sort of status in terms of size and sophistication, etc., how you manage that. And I think Eve's hinted at it, but it'd be great if she had more thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. It's a great question because it's a real difficulty in commercial mediations. Um, I think that's where the pre-mediation work is really valuable. So getting permission from the party who's going to be taking up more of your time on the day, for example, getting permission from them to share with the other side, or trying to get permission that they will need more time for processing information, possibly even sharing that they do present with certain ND conditions. It helps, but then checking in with the other party from time to time during the day to say, look, I did mention to you I would be spending more time, but I am neutral, and I just want to ensure that you're getting the most out of today as well. Is this working for you? So checking in with both sides during the day, not just forging ahead with a negotiation, can be helpful. So I think just being very mindful of it and trying to mitigate against that risk is vital. It's a good point.
Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. Roger, then, sorry, back to you.
Yeah, well, I was going to pick up on a question from Christine Scholes in the chat, which is similar.
Can we just invite Christine then to put the question so that everybody's clear?
Yeah.
Christine, are you there, please?
Thank you, and thanks everybody. Yes, my question was really, how do we as mediators, or what tips do the panelists have about how we make sure that the non-neurodivergent party, if I can use that term, feel that they are getting equal time and attention from the mediator, and being allowed to have their voices heard. Thank you.
And I was going to say pretty much exactly what Eve said, that it's very important to cover it in the pre-mediation Zooms and engagement. The point applies generally whether or not people are neurodivergent in trying to balance out the time that you give to each participant, and certainly during the meeting itself, you need to be very aware of how the time is going, how long you've been with each party, and if you can sense that you're going to take longer, then pop back into the other party and just let them know why and how it's going, and check that it's okay for them, because there's a lot of downtime for people, and they don't like, understandably, obviously, they don't like to have even more downtime.
Thanks, Roger. I think we've probably got time for one or two more questions or comments. If anybody's got anything, please. If they can put their, Gerard, I've lost you now.
Yeah, great session, guys. I only came in my practice. I've only come across it knowingly once, it being neurodivergency, if that's the right word. And it was a brother and sister arguing over, they jointly owned a house and they disagreed on how to split it up. One wanted to sell, one didn't. And when you do the plenary session and you go through the rules and you ask at the end, does anybody have any other rules that they would like to suggest? And the brother, they're both adults, the brother said, yes, he said, when I put my hand up, I would like everybody to be quiet. And he said the reason for that was that he was neurodiverse and he needed time to process what he was hearing. So, and that's when I really became aware that the pre-mediation work, asking the question, getting permission and that sort of thing. But that might just be, I mention it only because it was useful to me, and you might want to use it in your own practices, in that other, of course, we've all had today, we'll all be asking the questions sensitively in the pre-mediation work. But that was just to share, that's how a neurodivergent person sort of disclosed to me that they needed help in the process, and just putting the hand up was an easy way of doing that. And it worked really well.
Can I just pop in? I think the pre-mediation point is really important. I had a fairly complex JV commercial mediation a while back where both the protagonists had different profiles of neurodiversity and had self-declared. And in order to try, because there's quite a lot of substance to the mediation topics as well, we actually agreed that I would have 2 half-day separate sessions with each party in advance of the mediation by way of pre-mediation to run through, in particular, how the neurodiversity issues that they both raised were affecting things, so that we had those addressed and, if you like, ready to go for the mediation day, so that both parties would be comfortable that those were issues that were being raised. I think where it gets more difficult, and the other speakers have said this, is where one party is declared neurodiverse, but not necessarily declared and disclosed neurodiverse, and the other party is not declared or disclosed neurodiverse, but it transpires that they are exhibiting behaviors which may fall into that category. And that's where you've got to manage it. And I think the point that I think it was Eve made, but apologies if I've misallocated this, of making it very clear to the parties that you're taking a balanced approach. And we all know as mediators that whilst we may start with good intentions of giving absolutely equal time to both parties, that the reality is it will transpire that one room will need a lot more care and attention than the other, whether it's neurodiversity issues or not. So as long as you're communicating to the other party that, you're equally engaged with both parties and the time attribution is not an exhibition of anything other than impartiality, I think that's important. I often say to people newbies who don't believe it, that the party in mediation that you're most likely to lose control of is the one that you're not in the room with at that particular time.
Yeah, good tip. Thanks, Lawrence.
I thought we had somebody with their hand up, but that person seems to have disappeared. If they still want to raise anything, please do. And yeah, Edward, and then we've got one last, I think, Carl. So Edward, if you would like to go first, please.
Well, I think Lawrence has just answered my question, but I'd like to comment that labeling is difficult because some people stick labels on others and some people don't want labels. And so the question of equity between the two parties can only be based on a non-judgmental approach. And that is something that the mediator can do because they're not in this situation, but it's most likely that the other two parties are completely wrapped up in judgment. And so, to me, that's the main thing about mediation, is to enable, and it is miraculous when it happens, to enable people to climb down from their positions and actually recognize that each person's got needs and the other person's got needs which have not been met. And it is an amazing thing when it happens. It's not a question, although probably there's all sorts of comments that could come.
Thanks, Edward. So lastly, Carl Thompson, if you're still with us, please, if you want to just pose your question.
Oh yes, I didn't have. I think I put mine in the chat, Dave.
Yes, you did, but I think it's better if you ask it.
Yeah, that's right. What was it now? I think some of it's been answered actually. There are a couple of points. I mean, one is this is very theoretical, of course, and also it may require expert opinion and evidence in terms of what neurodiversity is. I mean, Michael Marcus has already put in the chat some issues around definitions of things. There's also the issue of risk in terms of misinterpreting probably drama and an attempt to derail a mediation using behaviors that can really acting behaviors of neurodiversity rather than actual diversity. Recently, only this week, I had a mediation involving someone where it was difficult to tell if they were actually acting as if they had been impacted or whether or not they were using it as a tactic. From listening to the other side, they were saying, oh, this person is not what you think they are, because we've dealt with this person for years and they've been perfectly capable of this. This is only being spinned now in the mediation. And that really leads to really an important point. I suppose the way you tackle this challenging as it is, depends on when you discover the neurodiversity. Is it pre-mediation or during the mediation, and at what point? Especially with solicitors representing and legal advocacy, sometimes the poor party that doesn't get a say until you notice that they're playing up online. They might say, you know, poke their face at the camera and go, "I want to speak," as this chap said, or "I do not speak English much." Right, and then you find actually they do speak English a lot because there's early evidence. So there are a lot of challenges in this thing, and I suspect we all need more training on it, and that's why I'm here today.
Thanks, Carl. I don't know if any of the speakers have any response to that or comment they want to make.
Just simply, Dave, to just I echo that you know, it's an area where it's increasingly important to learn as much as we can about it, to be able to help the parties make best use of the mediation process, because that's our role as mediators.
Thanks, Eve. I just finally invite the speakers if they have any other final comment that they want to make before we move on to housekeeping. No. Okay, thank you. On behalf of everybody who's present, I'd like to thank the 3 remaining speakers and also Zaza. One thing that Zaza didn't mention was that she and I co-mediated a dispute in a secure psychiatric unit several years ago. So that was quite challenging, and if anyone wants to know a bit more about it, I'm more than happy to talk to them offline. So just to mention that the next Mediators Peer Support Group meeting will be at 11 o'clock on the Wednesday the 15th of April. I'm taking bookings for that now. And the next Mediators New Breakfast Club will be at 0900 on Wednesday the 20th of May. Victoria Harris, the CEO of the CMC, will be our speaker then. I'm not taking bookings for that yet because I'll get confused. But if you want to put both of those in your diary, and if anybody wants to update their entry on the spreadsheet that I sent through, if you can email me so I can update that. So I'd now like to invite or whoever is a first timer who's on at them today to introduce themselves. And the first person I've got on my list